In a quiet office tower, a millionaire CEO walked in, expecting another normal morning. But what he found broke his heart. Two little girls, wearing old cleaning uniforms, scrubbing his marble floor with tiny hands. When he asked, "Who made you clean here?" their answer changed his life forever. They weren't working for money. They were working for love, to buy medicine for their sick mother. Watch till the end. This heartwarming story will make you believe that kindness still exists. And if it touches your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more beautiful stories. The morning light slid gently through the tall glass walls of Wellington Enterprises, painting gold reflections across the spotless lobby. Outside, New York City was just waking up. Cars honked in the distance, footsteps echoed on sidewalks, and somewhere, a street musician played a slow tune. But inside that building, silence ruled. Everything spoke of discipline and perfection. The scent of fresh coffee floated through the air, polished marble floors reflected every light, and the steady hum of elevators broke the stillness every few minutes. Employees hadn't yet filled the halls. It was that magical time when everything stood still, before business began. And then came Jack Wellington, the 34-year-old millionaire CEO known for his sharp mind and quiet charm. He stepped out of the elevator in a perfectly tailored sky blue suit, his brown hair neatly brushed back, his shoes shining like mirrors. Every move he made carried quiet confidence. He was a man who'd built his empire with discipline, sacrifice, and sleepless nights. He walked toward his office on the top floor, sipping from a small white cup, thinking about the day's meetings. But as he opened the heavy glass door, something stopped him mid-step. His eyes narrowed. In the far corner of his large, elegant office, where every inch usually glowed with order and design, two small shapes were kneeling on the floor. They weren't employees, nor cleaners in uniform. They were children. Jack blinked in disbelief. The soft sound of a wet cloth sliding against marble reached his ears. Tiny hands, barely big enough to hold a rag, were scrubbing the corners of his office. One girl had blonde curls that fell over her small face as she worked. The other had her hair tied in a loose ponytail, moving slowly but carefully. They were both wearing old gray cleaning dresses, far too big for their little bodies, and gloves that nearly covered their arms. Their shoulders looked tired, their small knees pressed against the cold floor. Jack's heart gave a strange, heavy thump. What on earth were two little girls doing cleaning his office at this hour? He stood silently, watching them for a few seconds. The sunlight caught the side of his face, showing the mix of confusion and disbelief in his expression. He didn't move. He didn't even breathe too loud, afraid they might be frightened and run away. Finally, he spoke, his deep, calm voice echoing across the wide room. "Excuse me," he said gently. The older girl froze. The younger one gasped softly and looked up, her big blue eyes wide with fear. Jack took a slow step forward, setting his coffee cup aside. "Are you twins?" he asked softly, trying not to scare them. They looked at each other for a brief moment. The older girl shook her head nervously. "No, sir," she whispered. "We're sisters. I'm Alice. This is Grace." The way she said "sir," with such careful politeness, hit him deep. They sounded scared yet respectful, like they had learned to fear adults in authority. Jack crouched a little to reach their level, his voice calm but filled with concern. "Who made you clean here?" Neither girl spoke at first. The only sound was the quiet hum of the air conditioner. Finally, the younger one, Grace, whispered with trembling lips, "We just wanted to help. Mama needs medicine." Jack's eyebrows drew together. Medicine? His throat tightened. He looked at their small hands, red from scrubbing, and the worn shoes on their feet. These children didn't belong in an office tower. They belonged in a classroom, with crayons and laughter, not buckets and mops. Something stirred deep in his chest, a memory, a feeling he hadn't known in years. Jack Wellington, the millionaire known for his cold business logic, suddenly felt his heart break in silence. He took a quiet breath, straightened his back, and whispered almost to himself, "What kind of world makes little girls work for medicine?" As he looked at Alice and Grace again, he knew this morning would not be like any other. He had walked into his office expecting another ordinary day of meetings and money. Instead, he had just stepped into a story that would change his life forever. Jack's heart burns with questions. Who are these girls? Where is their mother? And why are they forced to work here in secret? The millionaire is about to uncover a truth that will melt even the coldest heart. The soft hum of the air conditioner filled the grand office, but in one quiet corner, two tiny lives were working harder than anyone else in that building ever had. The taller one, Alice, only 7 years old, pressed her little palms against the marble floor, pushing the rag back and forth in steady circles. Her small face was tense with focus. She wanted the floor to shine, to look perfect, because she knew if it did, maybe the kind man in the big office wouldn't send them away. Beside her, Grace, her 6-year-old sister, was sitting on her knees with a tiny brush, dusting the corners near the bookcase. Her gloves were so large they kept slipping off her fingers, so she had tied them at the wrists with pieces of string. The gray cleaning dress she wore hung awkwardly on her thin frame, brushing against the floor with every move. Both girls had cheeks flushed pink from hard work, yet even with sweat on their brows, there was something pure in their faces, something untouched by bitterness. Their blue eyes held the kind of light only children could have, even when surrounded by hardship. Every few minutes, Alice glanced at Grace to make sure she was doing okay. "Be careful, Gracie," she whispered softly, her voice trembling just a little. "Don't get your dress dirty again. We can't wash it until Saturday." Grace nodded and gave a tiny smile, her golden curls falling into her eyes. "Okay, sissy, I'm trying my best." Her little hands moved in slow, careful motions. She wanted to do it right, for Mom, for the medicine, for the hope that maybe after today they'd finally earn enough for one more bottle that could make their mother's cough stop for a while. Alice looked around the grand room. The shiny glass walls, the heavy desk, the tall plants in white vases. It all felt like another world, far away from the one they lived in. Their apartment was small, dark, and smelled of medicine and dust. But here, everything smelled of lemon polish and soft perfume. "Do you think the boss will be mad?" Grace asked suddenly, her voice tiny and scared. Alice stopped for a second, her rag frozen mid-motion. "I don't know," she said, "but we just need a few dollars. That's all. Maybe he won't even see us." Grace's lip quivered. "What if he does?" Alice took her sister's hand gently. "Then I'll talk to him. I'll tell him we're not bad girls. We're just helping Mama." The innocence in her tone could melt stone. Even as she spoke bravely, there was fear behind her words, the kind of fear no child should ever know. The fear of hunger, the fear of being thrown out, the fear of being invisible in a world too big to notice them. They returned to work quietly, whispering sometimes to comfort each other. The floor shone brighter with every wipe, but their hands grew tired. Grace yawned softly, her voice barely a breath. "Alice, my fingers hurt." Alice bit her lip, hiding her own pain. "Just a little more, okay? We're almost done. We can't stop now." In that very moment, a small beam of sunlight slipped through the blinds and landed on them, making their hair glow like halos. It was as if heaven itself paused to look down at those two little souls, fighting their silent battle for love and survival. They didn't know that someone was watching. Behind them, Jack Wellington stood frozen near the door, his hand still on the handle. He hadn't moved since he first saw them. His sharp businessman's mind went completely still, overtaken by something deeper, something human. His throat tightened as he watched the two girls working like grown-ups, their tiny backs bent, their faces too serious for their age. He wanted to say something, but his voice caught in his chest. All his years of success, his million-dollar meetings, his power, none of it had prepared him for this sight. Two little girls cleaning his office to save their mother. A tear he didn't expect burned at the corner of his eye, but he blinked it away. He needed to understand first. Who were they? Why were they alone? Where was the person responsible for this? He took a deep breath and finally stepped forward, his polished shoes echoing on the marble floor. The girls froze. The silence in the room turned heavy, almost alive. Grace's brush fell from her hand, hitting the floor with a soft click. Alice slowly turned her head, her heart pounding. Her eyes widened when she saw the tall man in the sky-blue suit standing behind them. He looked calm, but his eyes were full of questions. And then, in a voice both firm and kind, he asked the question that would change everything. "Who made you clean here?" The world seemed to stop for a moment. The girls stared at him, unsure whether to run or speak. The millionaire's voice was gentle, but his eyes burned with concern. What he was about to hear from Alice and Grace would break his heart and push him to make a choice that would change all three of their lives forever. Jack Wellington stood still, his tall figure framed by the soft sunlight pouring through the office window. For a moment, the only sound in the entire room was the gentle ticking of the golden wall clock and the faint breath of two frightened little girls. His polished black shoes gleamed under the marble light as he took a slow, careful step forward. The sound of his steps, tap, 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 made the girls' small shoulders flinch with each movement. He didn't want to frighten them. He had faced boardrooms full of billionaires, ruthless competitors, and lawyers, but never had he faced two trembling children whose eyes were wide with fear and innocence. He bent slightly, his voice soft but steady. "Hey, are you twins?" The two sisters froze like statues. Grace, the younger one, clutched the little brush she had been holding as if it were a shield. Her bottom lip trembled. No, sir," she stuttered, her voice so small it nearly broke his heart. "I'm Grace. She's Alice. We're sisters." Jack knelt down on one knee so that his eyes met theirs. From up close, he could see their tiny freckles, their pink cheeks, and the dirt on their gloves. The older sister, Alice, looked at him warily, her chin trembling but her gaze steady, protective, like a little mother guarding her sibling. Jack smiled softly, hoping it might calm them. "Sisters, huh? You both look like angels. But tell me, who made you clean here? You're far too young for this kind of work." Alice hesitated. Her small fingers twisted the edge of her rag nervously. She didn't want to lie, but she was scared. Scared that he would send them away. Scared that he might be angry. Her throat tightened before she finally whispered, We clean to buy medicine for our mom." Her voice cracked slightly as she added, "She's sick." Those words hit Jack harder than he expected. The air in the office suddenly felt heavier. He studied their faces, the tired eyes, the cracked little gloves, the dust on their dresses. These weren't mischievous children sneaking around for fun. They were desperate, but brave. They were fighting a battle far too big for their small hands. Jack's heart, once trained to think in numbers and deals, now thudded with emotion. He swallowed hard, trying to steady his voice. "Medicine?" he asked quietly. "Your mother. She's not well?" Grace nodded slowly, her big eyes filling with tears. "She can't get up most days. We have to help her." Alice quickly wiped a tear from her sister's cheek. "We come early when nobody's here," she said, her voice shaking but proud. "We clean fast, and then we leave before anyone sees us. We just need to buy her medicine and some bread." Jack felt something ache deep in his chest. These little girls were supposed to be in school, laughing, running, living freely, not working before sunrise to save their mother's life. He reached out, gently placing a hand on the desk to steady himself. He couldn't let them see the emotion rising inside him. "Do you have a father?" he asked softly. The silence that followed said more than words ever could. Alice looked down and Grace bit her lip, shaking her head. Jack closed his eyes briefly. He had lost his father young, too, and the emptiness of growing up without one still echoed somewhere deep inside. Seeing them now felt like staring straight into his own forgotten childhood. The loneliness, the fear, the hunger for a helping hand that never came. He took a slow breath. "What's your mother's name?" Alice looked up hesitantly. Emma Carter." Jack nodded thoughtfully. He had no idea who Emma Carter was, but her daughters had already changed something in him. He felt his businessman's armor crumble bit by bit. "Listen to me," he said softly, kneeling a little closer. "You two are very brave. You shouldn't have to clean offices. You should be in school, learning and playing like every other child." Grace's chin trembled. "But we can't, sir. School costs money, and Mama says medicine comes first." Jack's throat tightened again. He looked between them, two tiny warriors in worn-out clothes, and he made a silent promise to himself. Whatever their story was, whatever it took, he would not let them go home hopeless tonight. He reached out, his voice low but warm. "Don't worry anymore. I'll take care of this. You won't have to do this again." Alice's eyes widened. You'll help us?" Jack smiled softly, the corners of his eyes glistening. "Yes, sweetheart. But first, you're going to tell me everything about your mom." The girls exchanged a glance, half relief, half disbelief. For the first time that morning, a flicker of hope appeared in their faces. Jack slowly stood up, glancing around the office once more. The sunlight caught on the polished floor where they had worked so hard. It sparkled like a silent thank you. In that moment, the powerful Millionaire CEO stopped being just a boss. He became something else, something more human, more alive, more kind. He turned toward the door and said softly, "Let's get you something to eat first. Then we'll talk about your mom." Alice and Grace looked at each other in amazement. No one had ever spoken to them that gently. And as Jack led them out of the office, one question echoed quietly in his mind. How many other little souls are working silently in this big city, unseen and unheard? He didn't know yet, but he was about to find out. Jack's heart is heavy with questions and a growing sense of responsibility. But when he sits the girls down for food and listens to their full story, the truth behind their struggle will shake him to his core and awaken the compassion he thought he had buried long ago. Jack stood there for a long moment, frozen in silence. His world, the world of glass towers, luxury cars, and signed contracts, suddenly felt small compared to the quiet courage of the two little girls before him. Their tiny voices had stripped away every layer of distance between wealth and poverty, between power and helplessness. The air inside his office seemed to grow heavy, like even the walls were listening to the painful truth spilling softly from their lips. Grace, the younger one, looked down at her knees, her hands twisting together nervously. "We don't have anyone else," she whispered, her voice trembling like the wing of a trapped bird. "Mom can't walk much, and no one hires kids." Jack felt that sentence pierce him deeper than he expected. No one hires kids? Of course not, but life had pushed them so far that they had to try anyway. Alice, the older sister, lifted her chin quickly, as if afraid her sister's honesty might get them in trouble. "We only clean here before people come," she said softly, her voice trying to sound brave but cracking at the edges. "We just need a little money for her medicine." That last word, medicine, hung in the air like a plea. Jack's chest tightened again. He had seen poverty before, yes. He had written checks to charities, given donations during holidays, and sponsored schools in poor neighborhoods. But he had never seen this kind of poverty, the kind that wore tiny gloves and fought for a mother's life. He looked at their faces. Grace's eyelashes glistened with tears she was trying to hide. Alice's lips were pressed tightly together, like she was holding her sadness in her throat, afraid it might spill and make her sister cry harder. He noticed how carefully they avoided looking at him now. They kept glancing at the floor, pretending to keep cleaning. Even now, even after admitting the truth, they were still afraid. Afraid someone might scold them. Afraid someone might tell them to leave. The room felt impossibly quiet except for the soft sound of their small cleaning cloths brushing against the marble floor. Jack's heartbeat felt louder than that sound. He took a slow breath and walked closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "You two shouldn't have to do this," he said gently. Alice looked up suddenly, her blue eyes glistening. "But we have to, sir," she said, her little voice trembling. "If we don't clean, we can't buy the medicine. If Mom doesn't take it, she gets worse. We can't lose her." Grace's lip quivered as she nodded, clutching the tiny brush to her chest as if it were a doll. "She coughs a lot," she murmured, "and her chest hurts when she breathes. The man at the pharmacy said the new medicine helps, but it costs more. We don't have enough yet." Jack's throat tightened again. For a moment, he couldn't speak. He just stared at them, unable to understand how two children had accepted such enormous responsibility with so much grace and quiet courage. He looked down at their small shoes, scuffed, old, one of them even torn at the side. Their socks didn't match. Their little gloves had holes near the fingertips, through which he could see the red, scraped skin underneath. He wanted to kneel and tell them everything would be okay, but he knew words weren't enough. He'd spent his life giving orders, but right now he didn't want to sound like a boss. He wanted to sound like someone who cared. He swallowed hard and said softly, "You clean this big office all by yourselves?" Alice nodded. "Yes, sir. We come early, when the sky is still dark. The man downstairs lets us in sometimes if we tell him we're helping." "The janitor?" Jack asked. She nodded again, her eyes lowering. "He doesn't know our names. We just come for a little while and leave before people come in. We didn't mean to get caught." Jack almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the innocence in her words broke his heart even more. They weren't afraid of punishment. They were afraid of disappointment. Grace's small voice filled the silence again. "We don't take much, sir. Just the money we earn. We don't want to steal. Mama said never steal. She said honest work keeps the heart clean." That single sentence hit Jack like lightning. Honest work keeps the heart clean. He turned away for a moment, pretending to look at the window, because he couldn't let them see the emotion burning in his eyes. He, a man who had everything, suddenly felt so small compared to their purity. He thought about how many board meetings he'd sat in, hearing people argue over millions, and how meaningless all those numbers sounded now compared to the quiet plea of two little girls working for a mother's heartbeat. He turned back toward them, his voice soft but firm. "No one is going to fire you," he said. "Not today. But you don't have to keep cleaning either." Alice blinked in confusion. "Then, how will we buy the medicine?" Jack took a deep breath and said the words that would change everything. "I'll help you. I promise." The girls froze again. Grace's mouth fell open slightly, like she didn't believe what she heard. Alice's eyes widened. "You'll help us?" Jack nodded slowly, the weight of his decision already deep in his heart. "Yes. But first, I want to meet your mother." He didn't fully understand why, but something inside him needed to meet the woman who had raised such brave little souls. Alice hesitated. "You really want to see her?" "Yes," Jack said quietly. "Right after we get you something to eat." Grace's stomach growled softly, as if in response, and for the first time that morning, Jack smiled. A warm, genuine smile. He offered his hand to them, palm up, his expression gentle. "Come on, girls. You don't have to be afraid anymore." The two sisters looked at each other, hesitating for just a moment before reaching out to him. Their small, gloved hands rested trustingly in his large, steady one. And as he led them toward the door, Jack knew this wasn't a random meeting. Fate had brought those little hands into his life to remind him what real strength and real love looked like. Jack decides to take the girls to his office lounge for food. But as they open up about their mother's illness, her pain, and their small apartment, Jack's heart begins to ache with memories of his own past, and a promise forms deep inside him that will soon change their lives forever. Jack's voice carried both authority and compassion as it echoed softly through the quiet office. His tall frame stood in contrast to the two fragile little girls kneeling on the cold marble floor. For a long moment, no one spoke. The ticking of his wristwatch was the only sound in the large room. He turned sharply to his secretary, who stood frozen near the door. "Who allowed children to work here?" His tone wasn't cruel, but filled with disbelief. The secretary stammered. "Sir, we didn't know. They come very early, before anyone else." Jack's gaze softened. His eyes shifted from the frightened secretary back to the two tiny girls who were now holding their small brushes tightly like shields. They didn't run. They didn't cry. They just looked at him with fear and confusion. Alice's voice trembled. "Sir, please don't send us away, but we'll be quick. We'll finish this corner and go home." That plea hit Jack's heart like a knife. He took a slow breath, then walked closer, kneeling down again so he could meet their eyes. His sky-blue suit brushed against the marble floor, but he didn't care. "You don't have to clean anymore," he said softly. "Come with me." Grace clutched her sister's arm tightly. Are you going to tell the police?" she whispered, eyes wide with fear. Jack's chest tightened again. What kind of life made children fear kindness this way? He shook his head gently. "No, sweetheart. I'm not angry. I just want to help." Alice blinked fast, her little chin trembling. "You mean, help us? Not fire us?" Jack smiled faintly. "You can't be fired from something you were never supposed to do." He stood and extended his hand. His palm looked huge compared to their tiny gloved fingers. For a second they hesitated. Trust was something the world had taught them to question. But then, Alice slowly placed her hand in his. Grace followed, her hand shaking. "Good," Jack said warmly. "Now we're going to talk. Just talk, no more cleaning." He guided them to the couch near the window where sunlight spilled across the floor like golden warmth. The city outside looked alive. Cars moved, people hurried, but inside, time stood still. Jack poured water into small glasses and handed them to the girls. "Drink," he said gently. "You both look tired." Grace took a tiny sip and smiled shyly. "It's cold," she whispered, her voice full of wonder, as if even clean water was something rare. Jack watched them, a heavy silence pressing on his heart. He couldn't understand how two children had slipped through the cracks of a city filled with wealth and power. As they drank, he noticed Alice's gloves, ripped, too big, the fabric nearly gray. Her small fingers were red and raw underneath. "Do you do this every morning?" he asked. Alice nodded, eyes low. "We come before people wake up. If they see us, they might get angry." Jack exhaled deeply, rubbing his temples. "No one will get angry now," he promised. "Not anymore." Grace tilted her head. "You're really not mad?" Jack smiled. "I'm not mad, but I am curious. Where's your mom now?" The room went quiet again. The sisters looked at each other. Then Alice spoke softly. "She's at home. She's sick. We just needed money for her medicine." Jack leaned back, his heart aching. The thought of their mother, alone, unwell, waiting for her little girls to bring money from cleaning floors, made his throat tighten. He rose to his feet slowly, eyes glimmering with resolve. "Then we're going to make sure she never worries again." The girls looked up, unsure what he meant, but the calm confidence in his voice carried warmth, a promise that something beautiful was about to begin. Jack looked at them and smiled gently. "Let's go see your mom." Alice gasped. You want to come to our house?" He nodded. "Yes, it's time I met the woman who raised two brave little angels." Grace's lips parted in surprise, her eyes glistening with hope for the first time that morning. And as Jack grabbed his coat, his mind was already racing with thoughts. What kind of place did they live in? What kind of pain did their mother endure alone? He didn't know the answers yet, but one thing was certain. His life was about to change forever. The morning sun poured gently through the tall glass windows, spilling warmth across the polished floor of Jack Wellington's grand office. The city shimmered far below, a sea of silver rooftops and yellow taxis. But inside the elegant room, all that mattered now were the two small girls sitting quietly on the velvet couch, their tiny feet dangling in the air. Jack moved carefully, like someone handling something delicate and precious. He placed a tray on the glass table. 2 glasses of warm milk, steam curling softly above them, and a small plate filled with chocolate cookies. The rich scent of cocoa and vanilla filled the air, replacing the cold smell of office marble. Grace's blue eyes widened. "Is this all for us?" she whispered. Jack smiled gently. "Of course. You've been working since morning." "You deserve something sweet." The little girl reached out hesitantly, her gloved hands trembling. She took a cookie, holding it as if it were a treasure. Alice sat beside her, still unsure, her little face unreadable, a mix of worry, confusion, and shyness. Jack noticed it immediately. "It's okay," he said softly, kneeling again so they could look at him without fear. "You're safe here. You don't have to be afraid of me." Alice finally picked up a cookie, her fingers shaking slightly. When she took the first bite, her eyes flickered with something fragile, a memory, perhaps, of a time before things got hard. Grace munched happily, her small lips forming a chocolate smile. "It's really good," she said, voice filled with pure delight. "Mom used to bake cookies when she was better." Jack's heart squeezed painfully. "She sounds like a wonderful mother," he said softly. "She is," Alice replied quickly as if defending her. "She just got sick, and everything went wrong after that." Jack leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "Can you tell me what happened?" Alice glanced at Grace, then down at her cookie. "Mom used to work at a bakery, but she got very weak. We didn't have money for the doctor. The landlord said if we don't pay rent soon, he'll throw us out," Grace added in a trembling voice. "So, we started helping. Just a little, cleaning places before people come. We didn't tell anyone. We didn't want to get in trouble." Jack felt something heavy build inside him, a mixture of anger at the world and admiration for their courage. "You shouldn't have to carry this burden," he whispered. "You're just children." Alice looked up then, her eyes wide with worry. "We didn't steal anything, sir. We only wanted to buy her medicine. Please believe us." Jack's voice broke slightly. "I do, sweetheart. I believe you completely." He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. These 2 innocent faces, pale from hunger yet filled with dignity, were changing something deep inside him. He had spent years building his empire, but nothing in his millions could replace the simple purity sitting before him. Grace's gaze wandered across the room. The golden picture frames, the silver lamps, the tall bookshelf full of leather-bound books. It all seemed like another world to her. "Is this your home?" she asked softly. Jack smiled warmly, shaking his head. "No, this is my office, but sometimes it feels like home. I spend most of my life here." Grace blinked. "It's so shiny," she said with innocent awe. "If we lived here, Mom would never have to be sad." That innocent statement pierced him deeper than any business failure ever could. He swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "Maybe your mom won't have to be sad anymore," he said. Alice frowned slightly. "You mean, you'll give us money?" Jack chuckled softly. "Money is not what you need most right now. You need peace and safety." He watched as the 2 girls finished their milk, the warmth coloring their pale cheeks. For the first time, they looked less frightened, as if the warmth of his kindness had melted a small part of their pain. Jack leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin. "Tell me something," he said softly. "If I wanted to visit your mom today, would she be home?" Alice hesitated, eyes flicking between her sister and Jack. "She'll be there. She doesn't go anywhere anymore." Grace nodded eagerly. "We can show you. Our home is not far, sir." Jack smiled gently, though his heart thudded with worry. "Then I'll come with you. We'll make sure your mother gets the medicine she needs." Alice's lips parted in disbelief. "You'd really do that for us?" Jack's voice was firm but kind. "Yes, no mother should suffer, and no child should clean offices to save her." He stood up, buttoning his sky-blue suit and motioned to his assistant outside. "Prepare my car," he said quietly. "We're going for a visit." Grace's eyes shone as she clutched her sister's hand. "Maybe Mom will smile again," she whispered. Jack smiled back at them, but deep inside, he knew he wasn't just visiting to help. Something inside him told him that this meeting would change everything. As they ate, Alice told him everything. Their mother had fallen ill months ago and couldn't work. The landlord had warned them to pay rent or leave. Alice, only 7, decided she would help. She found a cleaning broom behind an old store and started cleaning small places with Grace. They earned only a few dollars each week, but enough to buy cheap medicine. Jack listened silently, his hands clenched. Something in their story awakened an old pain in Jack's heart. When he was a child, his mother had also fallen sick. He remembered sitting by her bedside, wishing he could do something, anything, to help. He remembered cleaning shoes outside a church to buy her soup. Looking at Alice and Grace now felt like looking into his own past. He whispered to himself, no child should go through that again. Jack called his driver. "Prepare the car," he said. "We're visiting someone very important." Alice and Grace followed him quietly, still unsure what would happen. As they drove, Grace pressed her face against the window, amazed by the tall buildings. Jack said softly, "Don't worry, we're going to see your mom." Tears filled Alice's eyes. "You're not angry at us?" He smiled. "No, sweetheart, I'm proud of you." Their home was a small, dim apartment. Their mother, pale and weak, was lying on a thin bed. When Jack entered, she tried to sit up, embarrassed. "Sir, I'm sorry if my daughters caused trouble." He interrupted gently. "They didn't cause trouble. They made me proud. They love you so much." He placed an envelope on her bedside table. "This will cover your medicines, rent, and food for a while." The woman's eyes widened. "Why would you do that?" Jack smiled. "Because once someone helped my mother too." Before leaving, Jack knelt beside the girls. "I want you two to promise me something," he said warmly. Alice nodded quickly. "Anything, sir?" "Promise me you'll go to school. I'll take care of everything, the fees, the books, the uniforms." Grace's eyes lit up. "Really? We can go to school?" Jack smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Yes, you deserve a childhood, not a mop." A week later, a black car stopped outside a small school. Alice and Grace stepped out wearing neat white uniforms and carrying colorful backpacks. They looked nervous but excited. Jack was waiting outside, smiling proudly as they ran toward him. "Thank you, Mr. Jack," they said together, hugging him tightly. He laughed. "You two are going to make this world brighter. Don't ever forget how special you are." That evening, Jack stood by his office window, watching the sunset reflect on the city's glass towers. He whispered to himself, "Money isn't worth much unless it helps someone stand again." He had found a new purpose, not just profit, but kindness. Alice and Grace's lives were forever changed, but so was his. And somewhere in that small apartment, their mother prayed with tears of joy, thankful for a man who proved that compassion still lived in powerful hearts. Lesson: kindness has no class, age, or status. When the powerful choose compassion over pride, the world becomes a safer, fairer place for every child.